We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
With President Biden announcing the takedown of Al-Qaeda number 2 man, Ayman al-Zawahiri, both sides of the political aisle saw good reason to celebrate. But the fact that this mastermind of the 9/11 atrocity was found sunning himself in Afghanistan, that's a question that needs some answers. Now, has the presidential rhetoric since the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal been naught but dust in the wind? Well, to help us fathom the facts, we're joined by former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense Controller, Mr. Dave Patterson. Welcome back to the show, Dave.
Hi, Mark. Glad to be with you.
Taking down al-Zawahiri, this is a good thing, right? As in it's going to massively disrupt further terror attacks and planning.
Well, it's a good thing. And depending on how closely networked Al-Qaeda is, it remains to be seen whether this will be actually effective in stopping any further, or at least abating any further terrorist attacks. Al-Qaeda has always been somewhat of a loosely organized and loosely controlled organization. Directions and the wants of previously Osama bin Laden and now the late al-Zawahiri would put out their basic wants, and the network would go about doing it.
Okay, so what's this about him being in Afghanistan? This point to me really kind of sticks out. What does this tell us that he was both targeted and killed in Afghanistan?
Well, I don't think there's any surprise there. I mean, anyone who thought that Afghanistan would not suddenly go back to their old ways and embrace terrorist organizations, I think was terribly naive. And this simply points that out. I mean, here al-Zawahiri was visiting family. That's an interesting point. Family was probably there all along. And but nonetheless, it does raise some troubling expectations for the future.
So you say those who assumed that the Taliban wouldn't continue in this vein were being hopelessly naive. Does that include the Biden administration?
I think that's kind of a hallmark of the Biden administration. I've written quite a bit on this. They have these 2 points of views. If we give you something, then you'll naturally give us something. And why can't we all be friends?
Yeah, it's naivety is certainly one word for it. So based on this and what's happened, are we to assume that the Taliban is all too happy to coordinate with individual terrorists and terrorist organizations against the United States? And if so, how does that impact the supposed relationship building that's taking place between the Taliban and the Biden administration?
Well, I think that it puts the relationship building in doubt, but it's always been part of their nature. I mean, you know, we are right back now effectively where we were before, and below the 20 years ago.
So tell me about the Doha Agreement. See, this has been touted by many people in the upper echelons as something that is worth the paper it's supposedly written on. What's your take on it?
Well,
first of all, could you give us a couple of the details about the Doha, then give us your assessment?
Well, the Doha Agreement was originally penned and agreed to in the Trump era, but you'll recall that President Trump clearly, or made very clear, that if any aspect of this was in any way broken by the Taliban, then all bets were off, and we were back, bombing them and attacking them. The idea was that after the United States and allies would have withdrawn, the Taliban would have been more of a good global citizen, and especially would not be a haven for terrorism, and would seek out an attempt to stop any of these organizations who would like to get a foothold in Afghanistan. That clearly is not the case.
So what are the next steps then? The Doha Agreement has been broken. As you say, Trump made it very clear that all friendliness was off if such an agreement was broken. What's the position of the Biden administration here?
But the Doha Agreement was broken by the Taliban when they continued their attacks, and as the United States and allies were pulling out. I mean, it was clearly abrogated at that time. I mean, so to suggest that somehow this piece of paper is the Holy Grail, it is clearly not the case. And, and what are we going to do now? I think that I think the Taliban understands that you can run, but you can't hide, and to set up an operation like this is quite complex. And the other thing that it shows that I think that perhaps even myself was somewhat in doubt is that we have some level of good intelligence on the ground to have identified al-Zawahiri and where he was staying.
Okay, so if the Taliban are willing to hide this guy in a so-called safe house, I believe is how they term it, although clearly not very safe, what else are they willing to do?
Oh, I think that they're quite willing to sponsor terrorism outside of Afghanistan. It's a very simple equation for them. If you'll give us funds that we desperately need, we'll basically set up a Motel 6 for you, and so that gives a lot of leverage for wannabe terrorists to have a safe haven. And you'll remember that even while we were attacking in Iraq, al-Zakari was moving about quite freely, and finally, we took out that operation with 2 500-pound bombs from F-16s. So it's very difficult when you have a cordial population to seek out and destroy your enemy when they are so easily hidden among that population. Afghanistan gives ISIS and Al-Qaeda and a variety of others that opportunity to grow and be supported.
The graveyard of empires indeed. Dave Patterson, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be with you.
You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the Radio America network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. Remember, you can tune in for Liberty Nation on KSRM 920 AM and 92.5 FM out of Kenai, Alaska. Later on, we find out why CRT is coming for classical music. But up next, we're talking Liberty with Scott D. Cosenza on the grift that keeps on grifting. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I can
others.
do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.